my name is Kiana Kishiyama. I'm a second-year master's student at McGill University studying second language education. I'm a research assistant with my supervisor, Dr. Angelica Galante, and I'm also a member of the Plurilingual Lab. So my research focuses on international adoptees and their experiences with relearning their heritage languages, and how that kind of relearning experience contributes to their sense of identity. I was adopted from China when I was 11 months old. I grew up in British Columbia, Canada. My mom is a white Canadian and my dad was a second-generation Japanese immigrant. I grew up speaking English and French in my home, but I didn't grow up speaking Mandarin or Japanese. I tried to learn these languages in high school and during my undergraduate degree, but I never really achieved any sort of high level of fluency. For one time, I was in my first year undergrad taking a Mandarin course, and my professor looked at me and she said, "Oh, we need to speak after class." I walked up to her and she said, "Oh, you're Chinese?" And I said, "Yes, I am Chinese." So she basically said, "Oh, you're Chinese. You shouldn't be in the beginner class. You should be in the intermediate class." She assumed that I already knew how to speak Mandarin, and I said, no, actually that's not the story. I was adopted. English is my first language. I don't speak any Mandarin, which is why I am here in the beginner class. And she asked me to prove my lack of proficiency in Mandarin. I asked, how can you prove something that you don't have, right? So that was a very interesting experience, to say the least, and it kind of what spearheaded my idea of research was this idea of reclaiming your language. I was interested in Indigenous language revitalization, and I still am, but I wondered about my own context as an adoptee and whether other adoptees' experiences were similar to mine, were different than mine. Maybe some had learned enough of their heritage language to really feel connected to that part of themselves. So that's kind of what started the journey. So I've been able to do interviews with 11 participants, international adoptees who grew up in Canada and have had experience with relearning their heritage language. Something that I've created out of this work is what I call a narrative interdialoguing method for interviews. So basically, one of the gaps that I've seen in the international adoptee literature is that a lot of the research has been conducted by maybe non-members of the adoptive community, which is, great. I'm glad that we're still getting representation in research. However, I think it's still important to address how close you are with the people that you're working with. So this method addresses the fact that I'm also an adoptee, and in it, it's narrative because we're talking about our lived experiences and our stories. Interdialoguing because we are sharing these stories with each other, as opposed to me just asking a question and then getting an answer and then moving on to the next question. It's been a really unique and special experience because not only are people opening up and sharing their stories, but also I'm able to share some of my experiences as well, which in feedback that I've gotten from many participants is that it makes them feel better knowing that the person that they're speaking to kind of understands to an extent the kinds of experiences that they've had, or at least understands the context of, how they grew up, how these experiences might affect them, because I've gone through pretty much the same as well. So while my research is still in progress, some of the preliminary findings are that there's this, strengthening of identity by relearning heritage language. There's a stronger, sense of self. There's even some participants have expressed an acceptance of this part of yourself that you can't change. But there's also a lot of struggle between the heritage, ethnic birth identity, and the adoptive identity. There's the two cultures going on. There's the adoptive identity culture, which is most likely the dominant culture where you grew up, and then of course, your ethnic identity, what you look like, what country you came from. So those two identities at play don't always, combine nicely as we'd like to. But by learning a heritage language, there is some strengthening there. So some of the contributions that I hope to make with this work are, of course, in identity research with international adoptees, because our identities are so complex. Our stories are all so different. Our feelings and opinions and emotions are all so different around adoption and language learning. So I think that those unique stories should be highlighted rather than generalized. I also hope to make some contributions with language education. Maybe teachers can consider more their background of the student. Are they an international adoptee? Are they learning a language to go on an exchange? Are they learning to reconnect with their identity and their heritage? And I think, doing that can create really safe, meaningful language learning spaces, which I think would be so cool to see. Thank you so much for taking the time to stick with me. As you can probably tell, I'm very excited to be sharing my work with you all, and I'm more than happy to continue the conversation after this, so feel free to reach me by email or by Instagram, and I look forward to sharing mine and my fellow international adoptee stories with you.